Style here. Today we're going to be doing a sew along for one of my new fall patterns with simplicity, pattern 8451. We're going to start by sewing the dress view A. Let's get started. Okay, so let's go over all the pieces you're going to need. Now clearly you're going to need the pattern 8451, and in the back of the pattern envelope it gives you fabric requirements and notions, and of course it has a set of measurements so that you can pick the size that's best for you. Now you're going to need to cut out the following pattern pieces. Pattern piece number 2, which is the pocket. Pattern piece number 4, which is the front facing. Pattern piece number 5, which is the back facing. Pattern piece number 6, which is our sleeve. And you're also going to be cutting a lining, so please make sure that you're reading what you're cutting, whether it's fabric, interfacing, and lining. And then you're going to cut out pattern piece number 3, which is the back, and pattern piece number 1, which is the front. Okay, I have all of my pieces cut out, and I went ahead and interfaced my front and back facings, and I made sure that I cut my sleeve out of fabric and out of lining. Now that you have all of your pieces cut and interfaced, we can start sewing. Okay, so we're going to start with our pocket. And so the first thing we're going to do is you're going to fold along the fold line, and we're going to stitch using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, and we're going to go all the way around, creating a stitching line, and then around the curve, a 1/4 inch from the cut edge, we're going to do a basting stitch so that we can pull and create a bit of tension so that this folds onto itself. I'm going to pin my fold line in place. And if you have a serger, you can go ahead and finish the raw edge, or you can use your zigzag, or you can also turn up a 1/4 of an inch so that you have a clean finish. Okay, we're going to back stitch at the beginning. And then we're going to continue around. Okay, now we're going to create a line of basting stitches, and I'm going to start just above the curve. I'm going to back stitch to start. I'm going to stop midway and pull my threads, and then I'm going to start again about 1 inch away. I'm not going to backstitch. And now backstitch. Now we're going to take this to the ironing table and we're going to press it. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to turn this to the right side and poke out your corners. And now we're going to press. So I'm going to press first at the top, and then along the side I'm going to fold along our stitching line, right? So our stitching line is just barely rolling to the inside. And now we want to make sure that the rounded corners fall onto themselves. So we're going to use our basting stitch, and we're just going to pull a little bit until it starts to cut to the inside. And then do the other side. And as you can see, you see that naturally just starts to cup to the inside, and so you're just going to continue pressing along our stitching line. I'm going to turn mine right side up. And now all you have to do is create 2 rows of top stitching the way I've done here, and your pockets are ready to attach. Okay, so now we're going to work on attaching our pockets to the front of our dress. And so you should have made your markings for where your pockets are going to go. So I'm just going to align my pocket with my dots. And we're going to pin. Now we're going to go to the sewing machine and we're going to stitch close to the edge. You're going to back stitch at the beginning and at the end. You're going to stitch around your other pocket the same way. Okay, so now we have our pockets attached. We're going to go ahead and do our dart. I know this looks a little strange, but it's just another dart. So what we're going to do is match up the notch first. And then continue pinning. And we're going to sew using 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, I'm going to back stitch at the beginning. And remember, we're using 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. So completely off. And tie your threads. Go ahead and pin and sew your other dart the same way, and then you can clean your seam allowance with a serger or a zigzag stitch. Okay, once you have your front dart sewn, go ahead and make the darts in the back of your dress. You guys should know how to make a dart, so it's just very basic back darts. Make sure you do them on both your back pieces. Okay, so now we have our darts in the back done, and we're going to place our back pieces right sides facing. And I'm going to pin where my dot is, where the zipper is going to stop. I'm going to be inserting an invisible zipper, so what we're going to do is we're going to start sewing at our dot using a regular length stitch. And when we get to our notch or our dot, whichever you marked, where our zipper is going to end, we're going to switch to a basting stitch. And we're going to do a basting stitch all the way up and then attach our invisible zipper. Okay, we're going to back stitch at the beginning. And we're going to switch to a basting stitch. Now I want you to go ahead and press your seam open. Now I've switched to my zipper foot, and I have only my seam allowance to the right of me, and then everything else is to the left of me, and still using a basting stitch. I'm going to place my zipper so that the invisible part is down and centered along my seam line. And I'm going to make sure that my zipper pull is way past, so I always buy an extra long zipper so I can keep my zipper pull out of the way. And we're just going to baste this in place. Okay, we're going to stop where our marking is, and now you're going to turn it around and making sure that the rest of the dress is to the left of you and you're only working on your seam allowance. You're going to do the same thing. turn this over to the right side. And using your seam ripper, go ahead and pick out the stitches, the basting stitches that we created. Now you can go ahead and open up your zipper. And then I want you to try and get your zipper pull inside of your dress. So you can pull it completely out of the way. Now starting back up at the top, but using a normal length stitch, we're going to sew close to the edge, opening our zipper teeth as we sew. And you're going to do the same thing going up the other side. Go ahead and close your zipper. Now you have an invisible zipper. Go ahead and remove any loose threads. Okay, once you have your zipper in, now of course you should be finishing off all your seam allowances so that they're nice and clean. For the sake of filming quickly, I don't serge all of my seams, but you should be in the habit of cleaning off all of your seams so that the inside of your garments always look as good as the outside of your garment. So I'm going to go ahead and make a snip into my seam. So I'm going to press this open, and then I'm going to press my vent to one side, and then go ahead and finish off the edges of both sides. Okay, now you can see everything is nicely pressed. You don't see the zipper, so that's a good sign that you inserted your invisible zipper correctly if you do not see it. Now you're going to take your front, you're going to lay it over the top, right sides are facing. You're going to pin your side seams and your shoulder. And now go ahead and sew down your sides and across your shoulder using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Then finish your seams and press them to one side. Okay, you're going to back stitch. We're going to sew our shoulder first. And our side seam. Now, just a really quick tip, if you are not sure about the fit, this would be a really good time to just baste your side seams together so that you can try it on and see if you need to take more or less than the 5/8 of an inch seam allowance that we're taking. And then you can make adjustments and then just go over your stitching with a regular length stitch. Now go ahead and do the other side seam and shoulder the same way and finish your raw edges. Okay, we have our side seams and our shoulders done, and I know I just finished saying that I don't do all the serging for time's sake when I'm filming, but this fabric was shedding and it was getting on my nerves. So I went ahead and did some serging. Now we're gonna go and pin together our facings. So just open up the front, or your front, and then you're going to align your back pieces, and we're going to pin at the shoulder. And then match up and pin your side. Okay, and now just go ahead and go to your sewing machine and stitch across the top of your shoulders and your side seams using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, so I have my dress to the right side and I have my facing already sewn. So what we're going to do is we're going to place it right sides facing, and I'm going to pin first at my shoulder, making sure that my seam lines align. And I'm going to open out my zipper and make sure that I pin my edges there. And now we're going to sew all the way around our neck. So around the back and around the front using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, I'm going to start at the back. I'm going to back stitch. I'm going to pivot. Now go ahead and trim your corners, trim some of your seam allowance, and then do some understitching. Okay, so my seam allowances are towards my facing, and I'm just going to understitch as much as I can. Now turn your facing to the inside and press. Okay, so we went ahead and pressed our facing to the inside, as you can see. And I went ahead and basted around my arm's eye. So I basted my facing to my dress just to keep that those pieces together. Now we're going to work on our sleeve. So I'm going to set this aside for just 1 sec. Now we're going to take our lining with right sides facing. We're going to place them over each other, and we're going to sew across the bottom using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. And back stitch. And now we're going to go ahead and sew our underarm seam. I'm going to match my seams, my seam lines, and pin. Back stitch. And now we're going to understitch. So make sure that your seam allowance is facing your lining. Now go ahead and press your seam, and then you're going to baste the edges together. Okay, so we went ahead and finished our sleeves, got them pressed. I did my 2 rows of easing stitches at the top, and now we're going to go ahead and pin our sleeve. So I'm going to start by pinning my underarm seam. Right sides are facing, and then I'm going to work on the inside. So then I'm going to pin together my 2 double notches and my single notch. And then my center shoulder notch. And if you need to pull your gathering stitches up a bit to take up more ease, go ahead and do that. Now I'm going to stitch all the way around. Okay, we're going to back stitch to the beginning. Now you're going to sew your other sleeve the same way. Now once you have both your sleeves attached and you've finished your raw edges, all that's left for you is to do the hem of your skirt. Now, depending on the fabric that you've chosen, if your dress is a little more formal or dressy, you may want to hand stitch your hem in place with a blind stitch, or if your machine does have a blind stitch foot, an option, you can do it that way. Or you can also just press your hem allowance, finish the raw edge. Or if you're using a more casual fabric, you can finish your raw edge and then press and machine stitch your hem in place. Once you're done with that, you're completely finished. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this sew along. Until next time, peace.